The pact forged. The sky was no longer the sky. On the night the first spires descended, the heavens ripped open in wounds of light. From the rift poured structures that did not belong to any human imagination, vast towers of obsidian threaded with fire, pulsing like living hearts. They buried themselves in the oceans and mountains of earth, anchoring a dominion from beyond. And from those spires came gods. Not the gods humanity had carved into myth, but beings whose very presence distorted the air, whose voices rolled across continents. The alien pantheon had come, bearing their decree. Earth was no longer its own. It was soil, resource, territory. The Void Father stood at their forefront, his armor black as collapsed stars, his eyes burning with void fire. His voice was a commandment that pierced the minds of all who heard it. Kneel, mortals. Your sun will rise only as we will it. Your seas will move to our tides. You are nothing but clay for our empire. For many, despair struck deeper than fear. Humanity had seen war, famine, even nuclear fire, but never divinity made manifest. And yet, humanity was not alone. High above the stratosphere, Superwoman fought her first battle against the Pantheon. Her fists blazed as she collided with the Flame Serpent, a god whose body was made of molten scales. Each strike shook the atmosphere, fire and light scattering across the night like shattered stars. Her cape was burned to tatters. Her skin seared with wounds that refused to heal. Still, she did not fall. For every moment she remained standing, Earth had hope. But the Pantheon was endless, and one warrior, no matter how radiant, was still mortal flesh. It was then the strangers came. They arrived not in fleets but in fragments, a battered ship limping through orbit, shields flickering. From its hull emerged warriors scarred from wars older than Earth's civilizations. They called themselves the Starborn Pact. At their head was Kale the Iron-Blooded, a giant in cracked obsidian armor, his face marked by ritual scars that glowed faintly with embedded starlight. At his side stood Lyra of the Singing Blades, slender but fierce, her twin swords shimmering with crystalline edges. Behind them lumbered Thurs the Shaper, a being of stone and metal whose body shifted as though the earth itself bent to his will. Their ship broadcast no threat. Instead, it carried a signal, a vow. We are the broken who survived, Kale declared as he set foot on Earth's scorched soil. Worlds before yours have fallen. We swore an oath, no world shall face the Pantheon alone. If you resist, we resist with you. Superwoman landed before them, smoke rising from her battered form, her fists still glowing from the clash with the Flame Serpent. Her chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, but her eyes burned with defiance. You've seen them, she said, her voice steady despite exhaustion. You know what they are. They call themselves gods. Do you really believe we can stop them? Kale's helm retracted, revealing a scarred face, worn by centuries of war. He did not smile. But his words carried iron. Gods bleed. We've seen it. We've made them bleed. And if they bleed, they can fall. Lyra lifted her blades, their crystalline edges singing in the wind. The Pantheon expects you to kneel. That is their mistake. Mortals fight hardest when they have nothing left to lose. Superwoman felt the weight of their presence, not as saviors but as equals. Survivors. She looked at the smoldering ruins of the city below, at the soldiers rallying even against impossible odds, and she knew her answer. Then hear me now. Earth doesn't kneel. Not to kings. Not to gods. Not to anyone. If you fight with us, you fight as one of us. Kale extended his gauntlet hand, heavy as a star. Then the pact is forged. From the cliffs above Oslo, humanity's defenders watched the meeting. Dr. Ingrid-eyed, her uniform torn and face streaked with ash, felt something she hadn't felt since the sky first split, hope. She turned to the soldiers beside her. Do you see it? We're not alone. And if we're not alone, we can win. The roar of approval from weary throats shook the air. Humanity's fire, long smothered by despair, sparked to life. But high above, within the rift, the Void Father's eyes opened wider. He had felt the tremor, the defiance of mortals forging alliances, daring to stand beneath his shadow. "They gather," he murmured, his voice like a tide of ash. "Let them. Their fire will burn brighter before it dies." Around him, the Pantheon stirred. The flame serpent coiled tighter, the Oracle of Silence spread her black wings, and the Warfather lifted his weapon, forged from the spine of a dead star. The gods did not fear. They hungered. As the night ended, Earth was no longer just a world under siege. It was a battlefield of gods, mortals, and those who had sworn to fight them. Superwoman stood on the coast, Kale and the Starborn Pact at her side. Together, they gazed upon the horizon where the Pantheon's spires pierced the oceans. The war of alien gods had begun. And humanity had chosen not to kneel. The Shattered Alliance. The pact had been forged in fire and blood, but trust was slower to kindle. On Earth's battered coastlines, where Pantheon spires pulsed like blackened wounds in the sea, Superwoman stood shoulder to shoulder with the Starborn Pact. Yet beneath the fragile unity, cracks already spread. The pact had seen too many worlds fall. They had lived through betrayals, desperate bargains, and entire species vanishing into the Pantheon's chains. To them, trust was not given, it was earned through survival. And humanity, bold though it was untested in their eyes. It began at dawn in the ruins of Oslo. Kale the Iron-Blooded stood before Earth's generals in a makeshift war council, his armor scorched but unbroken. His voice carried the authority of centuries of war. "Your armies fight bravely, but bravery is not enough. The Pantheon cannot be fought head-on. We strike their spires first, cut off the roots before we face the gods." General Marcus Hale, a grizzled veteran with steel in his voice, slammed a fist on the table. "You're telling us to abandon cities still burning? Millions of our people are trapped. We don't leave them to die." Lyra of the Singing Blades tilted her head, her crystalline swords humming softly at her back. "If you waste strength defending ground already lost, you will have no strength left for war. Better 1,000 die today than 1,000,000,000 tomorrow." The room froze. Soldiers shifted uneasily. The words might have been logical, but they cut deep into human pride and grief. Superwoman stepped forward, her cape tattered but her voice steady. "Earth isn't just dirt and stone. It's people. If we fight and forget them, then what are we fighting for?" Kale's eyes met hers, dark as storm-forged iron. For a long moment, silence stretched. Then he said, "You fight for survival, not sentiment." And with those words, the first fracture appeared. Tension grew worse when the Pantheon struck again. The Warfather descended, a towering juggernaut wrapped in armor made from the bones of fallen stars. His weapon, a halberd burning with void fire, split tanks and tore fighter jets from the sky with a sweep. Superwoman flew at him first, fists blazing, striking with all her strength. The impact shook the earth, but the Warfather caught her mid-strike, hurling her into the side of a skyscraper. Kale and Lyra leapt to meet him, their blades and hammer ringing against divine armor. Thurs the Shaper raised walls of stone to block the Warfather's swings, buying precious seconds. Humanity's soldiers poured their firepower into the cracks of his armor, every missile and shell like a scream of defiance. For hours, the battle raged. And though the Warfather was not slain, he withdrew, his halberd dripping with molten steel instead of blood. It was a victory. But it was not clean. Thousands of soldiers lay dead. Entire districts had collapsed. And when the dust cleared, the arguments began again. "You charge without thinking," Lyra spat at Superwoman as the wounded were pulled from rubble. "Had you waited, we could have broken his guard together." Superwoman wiped blood from her lip, her eyes glowing faintly with restrained fury. "If I'd waited, more people would be dead. I won't stand still while others burn." "You risk everything for scraps," Lyra said, voice sharp as her blades. "One day, that recklessness will doom us all." Thurs rumbled, his shifting body creaking like old stone. Enough. The pact was not forged to bicker. But the words rang hollow. The divide was growing. That night, in the shattered remnants of Oslo's cathedral, Superwoman stood beneath a broken stained glass window. The shards caught the moonlight, painting fractured colors across her face. She was tired, bone-deep tired, but the war did not pause for exhaustion. Kale entered quietly. He moved like a weight carried the world, his armor whispering with every step. "You fought well today," he said, voice low. "You don't believe that," she replied, not turning to him. Kale's silence was confirmation enough. Finally, he said, "You are fire. Bright, fierce, untamed. But fire burns quickly." Superwoman's eyes narrowed. "And you? You fought so long you've forgotten why. All you see is survival. But survival without purpose is just existing." Kale studied her, his scarred face unreadable. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Do not mistake me. I respect you. But I have watched worlds fall because their champions believed defiance alone was enough. If you are to lead this world, you must learn that survival sometimes demands sacrifice." Superwoman turned at last, her fists glowing faintly. "Then we'll do it our way. We'll fight. We'll bleed. We'll even sacrifice. But we will not abandon our people. Not for you, not for the Pantheon, not for anyone." For the first time, Kale almost smiled. Not in mockery, but in recognition of something fierce and familiar. Perhaps, deep down, he wanted to believe in her fire. Far above, in the rift between stars, the Pantheon watched. The Oracle of Silence spread her wings, shadows dripping from them like ink. She whispered without sound, her words echoing in the minds of the other gods. "They fracture. Their pact bleeds before it truly lives. Push harder, and they will break." The Void Father's void fire eyes glowed brighter. "Then let us see what happens when mortals taste despair. Send the serpent again. And this time, let the skies burn." On Earth, dawn approached. Superwoman stood with humanity's soldiers as the first light broke over the horizon. Smoke curled from shattered cities, but voices still sang in the rubble, survivors refusing to yield. Behind her, Kale and the Starborn Pact prepared their weapons. The air between them still carried tension, but beneath it was something else, the faintest trace of respect. The alliance was cracked. Fragile. Uncertain. But it still stood. And in the war of alien gods, sometimes standing was the greatest defiance of all. Humanity's fire. The sky above Earth blazed red. The flame serpent coiled down from the rift like a burning chain, its body endless, its scales brighter than magma. Cities across the Atlantic coast lit like tinder as it passed. Entire forests vanished in its wake, oceans boiled, and the air itself tasted of smoke. The Pantheon had sent one god to finish what the Warfather had failed to do, break the fragile alliance before it could solidify. Superwoman met the serpent head-on. Her fist struck its molten body, and the shockwave flattened waves for miles. She dove through its coils, ripping scales free with each strike. The heat seared her skin, but her scream was louder than the flames. Still, the serpent was vast. For every wound she carved, 10 more coils tightened around her. It lashed her into the ocean, boiling water around her as though she were nothing more than driftwood. Kale and Lyra descended next, the Starborn Pact striking in unison. Lyra's crystalline blades hummed with alien energy as she sliced through the serpent's tail, severing a length that fell into the sea like molten stone. Kale's hammer struck its body, detonating with the force of a collapsing star. Thurs the Shaper raised cliffs from the ocean, forcing the serpent's coils upward, breaking its rhythm. Together, they held the god at bay. But even united, they struggled. And it was then, at Earth's darkest hour, that humanity rose. Across every continent, armies had watched. They had seen cities fall, oceans burn, gods descend. Many had despaired. But the sight of one woman, standing against monsters that even the stars feared, had lit something in them. And that something was fire. General Marcus Hale stood before his command tent in New York, his face streaked with soot. His men had already lost half their strength, but when the call came, he gave the order without hesitation. Every missile, every shell, every drone, We throw everything. In New Delhi, Commander Priya Varma redirected satellites once meant for weather to beam coordinates to every artillery unit. We will carve this monster piece by piece, she swore. In Sao Paulo, guerrilla fighters dragged ancient rocket launchers from basements, aiming skyward. In Siberia, submarines that had slept since the Cold War woke, their warheads launched not at rival nations but at the spires of the Pantheon. And in Africa's deserts, children carried water to soldiers, who strapped on the last of their gear and prepared to march. For the first time in history, humanity did not fight as fractured nations. They fought as one species. The sky lit with fire. Missiles streaked upward like swarms of steel comets. Jets soared through the serpent's flames, dodging scales the size of buildings, firing everything they had. Artillery thundered from coastlines, shaking the earth as shells tore into divine flesh. And something incredible happened. The serpent screamed. Its voice shook mountains and split glass, but it was pain, real pain. The Pantheon's god bled molten fire into the sea. Superwoman burst free from its coils, her body blazing with light. She felt the surge of humanity's will like a tide at her back, fueling her strength. She rose into the sky, fists blazing, her voice carrying across comms and open frequencies alike. They're fighting for us. For all of us. Don't stop now, push harder. Kale glanced up at her, surprise flickering in his scarred features. By the stars, they're not just surviving. They're rising. Lyra laughed, fierce and wild, her blades singing louder. Maybe there's hope for these mortals after all. Together, with humanity at their back, they struck as one. The battle became a storm. Superwoman soared through the serpent's maw, striking upward until she shattered its jaw. Kale smashed its spine with hammer blows that cracked the sky. Lyra carved through its coils in a blur of light, each slice severing another mile of godflesh. Thurs raised mountains beneath its body, pinning it as missiles hammered its chest. And humanity did not relent. A chorus of soldiers shouted into radios, languages mixing into one voice. Hold the line. Keep firing. For Earth. The serpent twisted one last time, its body writhing in desperation. But its flames guttered, its coils faltered, and with a final scream that echoed through the stratosphere, it collapsed into the ocean. The sea hissed, boiling for miles. Steam rose into the sky like a funeral pyre. The serpent of the Pantheon, slayer of worlds, was dead. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then, from every battlefield, from every trench, from every shattered city, the sound rose, not despair, but triumph. Humanity roared. The fire had spread, unquenchable. Superwoman stood on the cliffs beside the Starborn Pact, her chest heaving, her skin burned, but her eyes fierce. She looked to the soldiers who cheered below, and she felt it in her bones. This is their fire, she said softly. Kale's scarred lips tightened into something like respect. You were right. Mortals are dangerous when they refuse to kneel. Lyra sheathed her blades, watching the horizon where the rift still burned. And the Pantheon will not ignore this. They will come with everything. Superwoman turned, fists clenching, her cape whipping in the storm. Then we'll give them everything we've got. Humanity isn't done. But high above, in the rift, the Pantheon stirred. The Void Father's voice rolled across the void, cold and vast. So they burn brighter than expected. Good. Let the fire spread. It will make their ashes all the sweeter. The Oracle of Silence tilted her head, shadows dripping like venom. They believe this victory matters. Shall we correct their illusion? The Void Father raised his hand, and the stars themselves seemed to dim. Summon the War Father again. Ready the final descent. If humanity wants fire, let them burn in a storm. On Earth, survivors raised their eyes to the sky. The serpent was dead, the impossible had been done. And though God still loomed above, humanity's fire would not be extinguished. For the first time, Earth believed.